Okay, great.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Mo Show Live. We're having some technical difficulties, but we're going to work through them and do that's part of the live streaming atmosphere here. But I'm really excited about today's show. I've got a friend here and somebody that we've worked with in my office that I'm excited to bring and introduce to everybody. One of the things, that we all face in today's aging society is, what happens to our loved ones, our family, our parents, our grandparents as they age. Recent statistics show that over 46 million Americans are age 65 or older today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that affects all of us. And that as we age, our lifestyles change, our independence changes, and the way we function changes. But we want to maintain our independence. And today we're going to talk about those things. And we're going to be talking about the independence problems and issues that are facing our seniors and their families. And today's guest, Chanda Crutcher, is going to be talking about that with us. And before I introduce Chanda, I want to remind everybody to please like and share this post so we can spread the word about this message, and so more people can have the questions they may have about their family members and how they can best help and with their needs and issues addressed, so we can spread the word about the kinds of things that Chanda and her group does. But today's guest is Chanda Crutcher. Chanda has 25 years of experience working with seniors in long-term care and senior services. She's worked in administration in nursing homes and assisted living facilities. She's a certified geriatric case manager. She was the very first registered guardian in the state of Alabama. She is the founder and director of ASAP, and ASAP stands for the American Senior Assistance Program. She and her staff over at ASAP work with many seniors and their families to help coordinate resources and medical treatment and care for those seniors to help make sure they have the best and independent lifestyle they can have for their situation. So it's my honor today to have Chanda Crutcher on. Chanda, how are you doing?
I am doing well, Morris, and I'm so thankful for you for having us on.
Yeah, well, so glad to have you here. But as I said when we first started, we all have parents, our
Mm-hmm.
loved ones that are going to be in this situation, and we're going to all be in this. Hopefully, God
Yeah,
willing, be in
if
this
we're
situation
lucky,
at
if
one
we're
time.
lucky, we are all aging.
That's right. So, I think a lot of our audience and a lot of people who are going to be watching this video and seeing this video are
Yes,
probably people who have parents or maybe grandparents that they're already looking out for, or this is on the horizon. So I really
yes,
want to talk about some of the topics as we talk today that maybe they may be facing or seeing and how they
for
can
sure,
plan for that.
for sure.
And you and I had a chance to talk earlier today, and I think one of the topics that you said when you look at these issues facing seniors today that you're really passionate about is, being proactive or having a plan versus being reactive. Tell us what you mean
Most
by that.
definitely. Most definitely. Morris, I think a lot of times we wait until it's at our front doorstep to do anything about many things, whether that's our plumbing or our cars. And we do the same thing with our livelihood, whether it's us personally who's aging or our aging parents. We wait until there's an issue to have dialogue that could be very helpful. But what I have found in doing this for many years is that when people act proactively in addressing some of the issues that we're going to face as we age, the outcomes are just better. You save money, and sometimes it can save your life by just planning proactively, having conversations. A hard conversation had pre crises is just much easier had.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's true in a lot of life, but unfortunately, human nature sometimes is to procrastinate. But I think when you're dealing with serious issues like this, that it's really important to plan ahead. Um,
Yeah, and we, for the most part, Mars, I found it beneficial when talking to people to break that planning ahead down into two categories. And basically, it's what do you want to see happen with your health? Where do you want to live? What is quality of life to you? And then, secondly, what do you want to see happen with your stuff? Who's going to manage your stuff if you can't? Where do you want your things to go? And so there's two separate conversations that have to be had, two separate roads of planning, if you will. what do I want to see happen with me? What is quality of life for me? Because it's defined different by everybody.
Right.
And what do I want to see happen with my stuff? How do I want my things taken care of?
Yeah, and those things have multiple issues and things that go within each one, right? I mean, you've got,
Yes, most definitely.
the healthcare issues and things that go with, and that your well-being and how you're doing can dictate where you want to be and
Yes.
your living
Yes.
arrangements and certainly your financial situation. But and as we probably will talk about a little later, the cost of some of where you want to live and do may dictate some of your your stuff
Yes.
too.
Yes.
So, I think one of the things that, I've experienced personally with my family and close family that we've seen get older and dealt with as I've grown older myself is seniors typically want to maintain their independence. I mean, that is very, very important to them. They don't want to be constricted by their children or their family about where they can go and when they can go there and do. I mean, do you find
Yes.
that to be true?
Yes, yes. I tell people all the time, nobody has dreamed of the day when they can pack up all of their stuff and move into the nursing home up the street and hand over their checkbook to their responsible party. That is no one's idea of paradise. But I tell you that is a very real reality if things aren't put in place to help prevent that. And so, with focusing on independence, Morris, the one thing I say, and there are three different keys that we try to really encourage people to pay attention to with regards to independence. And the one is, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. Stay active.
Right.
Don't let your dreams fizzle out just because your years are increasing. A lot of times we find in retirement, there's been people have planned very well for their working years. But they don't plan well for their retirement years with regards to just staying active and doing things that stimulate your mind, learning new languages, learning new things. Those are all things to help maintain that independence. But also nurturing those close relationships, or nurturing those relationships that matter most to you. Because even the best well out thoughts and plans with regards to managing your health and managing your stuff, we have found if you don't have relationships that are in place, Morris, to help guide you through and help to honor your wishes when you can't necessarily honor your wishes. Those are just key components, or those people that you pour into become key players in helping you to be as independent as possible. I have people all the time ask, what should be my goal of aging? And I think it is to live in the least restrictive way, which means to be as independent as possible, in a way that best preserves assets, and affords you the highest quality of life as defined by the individual. So if you are the individual looking at what is my goal, quality of life as defined by you. But if you don't define quality of life, that can be a very a tricky thing when someone else is trying to evaluate. And if you're managing care for someone else, if you have an aging parent or an aging loved one, you have to be very careful that you're not helping someone to age well as defined by you, but age well as defined by how they've lived life.
Right.
So
Well,
independence starts with a conversation and awareness of what independence means, because it can mean something different for me, Morris, than it does for you.
that's a great point. We so often in our world and what we do at my office in the legal world, we talk about that kind of planning, from an estate standpoint, will in the state, but you really bring it home to talk about it. Hey, what about that post work, that retirement, the golden years that we like to hear them called as? Let's talk about that too. Let's not just talk about my estate, but let's talk with my family, my loved ones, about what we want to do. This is how I want to live out my retirement, and these are the kinds of things that I want to do. Here's what I want to do with my stuff. Here's where I'd like to live if possible, and those kind of things. And I think that's a really good point that, to be honest, I've never really thought about. I've got my legal hat on, thinking about, estate planning.
Mm-hmm. And it can make, if you don't take that step first, Morris, we had some mutual clients. I work with your office quite a bit, and that's when it gets difficult, far more difficult, far more costly than it ever has to be, when we have our loved ones or our clients have not clearly articulated, this is what quality of life is for me. This is how I want to live to my end days. If they've not articulated that, it leaves way to exploitation,
Right.
misinterpretation of what mom would want or what dad would want. So I say have the conversation. Don't just have it with one person. Write down your wishes. I don't know how much time we're going to have here to talk about advanced directives and power of attorneys. But when we're talking about taking care of your health, planning for your health, there are tools out there that helps you capture that. Um, get a good attorney to help you draft that up if that's what you need. But draft out your wishes, put them in writing, and share them with anyone who will listen. Because if you can take the ambiguity out of what aging well means for you as an individual, the likelihood of your wishes being honored and subsequently you having as high a quality of life as possible, it's more of a reality or
Right.
more of a potential reality.
Well, those are great suggestions and great tips. And those are things that, that I think help you from the standpoint of being more proactive and planning ahead than being reactive. And again, I think that's what your big point is here. And I think those are just great tips to do, and to sit down as a family unit and friends and have those conversations while they may not be, it may not be something that you really think about doing. And again, but you
Yeah.
need to do that on the front end so you and everyone around you for that matter can have a better quality of life, as you age and you get into those golden years.
Yeah.
What I'd like to do, and I think, we've kind of touched on some of this, was maybe, you've got so much experience in this area. I really think it would be helpful for our audience maybe to touch on a few of the big issues that I think you and your staff that you see at your business and you've seen throughout your history in geriatric care, that maybe just some issues to look out for, bullet points and things that may be useful knowledge that people can use that and put into play and then go out and do some more research on it for them and their loved ones. One of the things that I think we see a lot, the first one I was, touch on was like nutrition. I mean, I know that's probably an issue that you see. These are some kind of the warning signs or things that you may see with some of your elderly loved ones. What are some of the things that when people should be looking out for with nutrition with their loved one?
Yeah, and for the ease of conversation with going into these and just some of those hot buttons to look for, and that's whether we're touching on nutrition or fall safety or any of the other issues, Marcia, I think we're going to hit on today. I'll break them down into ABCs. And so going into the dialogue with nutrition, A, accept the reality. If you have a loved one who's aging, or if you're aging and you start to notice significant weight loss, the reality is there may be some nutritional concern. If you start to see significant weight gain, there may be some nutritional concern. And we have to accept the reality. That is the biggest issue I see with those healthcare related quality of life issues. There are indicators that exist far before people tend to seek help, far before family members eventually get involved. We see things. And so, Mars, when they get to you or they get to me in my office and my team, one of the first questions I've learned to ask is, when did you notice this begin? When did you notice appetite changes? When did you notice that there was a lot of expired food in the refrigerator? When did you realize that mom hadn't been to the grocery store in a month? Or it takes months for her to go back to the grocery store. You never notice any fresh items in the home. I tell people, when you visit an elderly relative, open the refrigerator, open the pantry. Those things can be very telling. But just the simple things as how clothes fit. If that individual is not driving and they have mobility issues, don't assume. And so A is to make no assumptions when it comes to quality of life things associated with aging and nutrition. It's one of those key quality of life indicators, Morris. You show me someone who's not eating adequately, and I'll show you someone who's falling, someone who's cognitively impaired, and they're on the perfect road for a slip in their quality of life. And that could be literal with a fall, or just new disease and diagnoses. But A is just accept the realities, and since we're on nutrition, accept the realities that as we age, our taste buds change, our nutritional needs change. um, and someone who was cooking every night nutritious meals, when they age and they can't do that anymore, someone has to come in and supplement that. Food is not going to fall from the sky. And I think we forget that with our elderly neighbors and others who are in impaired positions.
Yeah. Well, those are great points. And I think in like a lot of things in life, that we have to accept that reality, and we have to be cognizant and in touch with our elderly loved ones to check in and see what's going on, and whether that's a phone call or a visit, and pay attention to the details. I think that, as they always say, the devil's in the details. Like you said, are their clothes fitting loose? When you open the refrigerator, do you see expired milk and things that are way out of date that are like, that's not like mom, or that's not like dad, doing? And I think paying attention to those things, and then asking your siblings or others that are around your parents, hey, have you noticed this issue? Because I think it's probably, a collaborative effort there.
Yes. You hit another A, Morris, and that's ask. Ask tons of questions. I think sometimes we assume first, and we don't ask enough questions. We go in with answers, and that's no pun. I'm not trying to come up with all the A words now, but we go in with answers before we ask a lot of questions, especially us busy adult children that think we know a little bit of something. Instead of going in and joining that senior neighbor, parent, grandparent on their journey, we go in making assumptions, and we don't ask a lot of questions. And when you don't ask questions of other interested parties, such as siblings, that's when conflict arises.
Right. Well, and along those lines, I think, another issue that I know that I see, and it's even complicated when you're in your younger age, that I see in my law practice, is managing medication and doing, and that I know that, a lot of times doctors are so specialized now that when people go to the doctor, they don't go to just the old family doctor down the street who handles everything, that knows your care and treatment.
Yes.
You may have 5 or 6 doctors.
Yes. And I guess, Mars, it's perfect to bring in the B. And we'll talk about medication specifically with the B, but you can apply it to nutrition as well. But be specific. So if we're talking about medications, you want to know specifically what that individual or what you're taking. Saying I'm on 2 blood pressure medications, I take something to help me go use the restroom or to not use the restroom, it doesn't work, because you have so many specialists now that coordinating care can be even the more difficult. So with regards to managing medications, if that's the topic that we're looking at, you want to be very specific. You want to have a list of all the medications you're on, who prescribed them, when they started, and if they're still needed. Polypharmacy is a term that we use to describe when someone, and I think the number is on 7 medications or more. But what I'm finding in our senior population is that oftentimes people are on meds that are no longer therapeutic, Morris. The doctor prescribed it 20 years ago, it worked 20 years ago, it works now, and the issue could still be an issue or not. Or you have a specialist that you're seeing that maybe your doctor knows about, maybe not. And so when you're specific and you have that list of medications should follow you, not just to your primary care physician, who should be quarterbacking what's happening with all of the other specialists, but if you go to the ER, that list should be easily accessible. If there's an emergency, that list should be easily accessible. And definitely if you're going to specialists, that list should be easily accessible, because all meds should not be given together. And so be very specific when you're talking about medication management, in the way of specifically knowing what you're on, knowing who prescribed it, why they prescribed it, and if it's still needed. Because medications, again, they titrate different in our bodies when we're children and when we're in our 20s and 30s than they do when we're in our 60s and 70s and 80s. And so dosages that worked many years ago may not work any longer. And you've got to know what you're on. You've got to know why you're taking it. Because many medications can cause fall risk. Falls are the number one cause of quality of life shifters, up to and including death. And medications can cause falls.
Yeah.
Medications can cause confusions. And Mars, a lot of times when staying on the topic of medications and being specific, over-the-counter medications and supplements count in that. I have people tell me, well, I just took Benadryl. Well, Benadryl will land you on your tail. Dosage that is not correct for you and you're aging
Right.
with depth
Right.
perception issues and whatnot.
Well, so for everybody watching there, I think one of the big takeaway there is to make sure, and this really applies across the board, whether you're 34 or 74, if you're taking multiple medications, that I think the big takeaway that I got there from Chanda is, guys, put down what you're taking. Not, as Chanda said, not I'm taking blood pressure medicine or I'm taking this I'm taking a pain medication or a muscle relaxer. The exact medication you're taking and the dosage that you're taking and the prescribing physician. And because there are
Yes.
contraindications for medications, and to make sure that you have that list on you in your purse or in your wallet or on a smartphone or something somewhere where someone can get to that list to provide it to anybody that you may need at any time, right?
There's so much technology out there and so many different tools that you can use to be very specific about your plan of care. And I know we're going to list some of those resources in the comments below after this call, Morris. But there's no excuse, is where I'm going, to not have clarity on what makes you tick. And if the medications are valuable enough to your livelihood to put them in your mouth, then you have to take the time to manage them. And managing them starts with understanding exactly what you're taking.
Right.
And being able to get that to the parties that may be able to treat you in the midst of a crisis or just a routine appointment.
Right. And you need to not only know them, but as you were alluding to, making sure for your other quality of life issues, knowing the side effects and impacts from them, right? Because that one medication may impact you one way, but if it is taken in conjunction with another 5 other medications, it may have a different impact. And then, how, as we talk about, maybe fall risk, how that impacts your mobility and your coordination and your reflexes. It could really have a substantial impact on your quality of life.
Yes.
Speaking of that, I know that, as you mentioned, earlier, that, I know that when someone has a fall or a fractured hip, that is one of the biggest, dangers to a senior, that could really cause a shift in their lifestyle and cause them to, a really downward slope in their health. As they're aging, what are some issues or things that you see that, when you walk into a home or you're going to meet with people and you say, oh my gosh, they really need to do X, Y, Z, or there's some signs that you see that are just red lights to Chanda in your world of fall risk?
Yes, we do a very detailed safety assessment, Morris, and I think I want to give the disclaimer off the bat that everyone is unique and different, and so I try to stay away from cookie cutter interventions because people are different. But as a rule, floor rugs are a major fall risk, So you want to be careful, and I say typically the nicer the rug and the better the pad, the more increased the fall risk, because you're looking at the variance between the floor and the height of that rug. And you take just a toe width, and it can be a significant risk in a home. So look at those floor rugs. The closer the floor is flush to the ground, the lesser the risk. But you also want to make sure that they're securely affixed to the floor. So those rugs that slide around, the kind that have lost the rubber backing on the bottom, throw them away. They're just not worth it, especially in the bathroom where the floor is inclined to be wet. Those rugs just aren't worth it in those environments. Secondly, step ladders. I say if it's a parent's home or if it's a personal home, pull everything down where you can reach it. A step ladder is a fall waiting to happen in the home of an older adult who may have depth perception issues. Another thing we do a lot of is when there are stairs is making sure that we put some type of contrast on the stair. And what I mean, Mars, if you have let's say black stairs or brown stairs and they're all the same color. I experienced this when I was expecting. I have a new 4-month old. Shout outs to Sing Joy. But when I was expecting in that belly, it affects depth perception. Well, as we aging and just our change and things that are going on, it affects depth perception. So if you could just put a color contrast on the edge of that step so that you don't miss those stairs. And so that's another thing that we do when we go in and do our safety assessments with seniors is a lot of times we'll take a strip of colored tape. We've painted them different contrast right there on the edge just so depth perception isn't as much of an issue. And I learned a trick from a designer friend, speaking of the depth perception issues. If you go into a bathroom where most of the falls happen, Morris, and usually the toilet is white, the floor is white, and the toilet seat is white. So if you have someone with a depth perception, the chances of them missing that toilet is great. And you can minimize that risk easily by just changing the color of the toilet seat. So putting a black toilet seat or a brown toilet seat can help with making sure that depth perception issues don't cause falls that can be prevented.
Yeah, well, those are great tips. And one other thing that I think I've experienced and seen and heard about is just decluttering and trying to make sure you have wider pathways for walkers and stick canes and just trying to remove any trip hazards and things along those lines as well.
And don't call senior stuff clutter. You can't call it. We're gonna redecorate. We're gonna move on some of the things that have been here for a while. But you don't want to walk in, Mars. Just a pointer. You never want to walk into your mom's home and say, "Mom, we need to get rid of some of this clutter." Just a word to the wise. It will not happen.
Well, it's a laughable point, but it's a valid point, right?
Yes,
and it's one in which I think that is a really good point to make. And kind of the next topic that I wanted to talk to you about is a lot of this, that what you're talking about when you're dealing with your family or your neighbor or your loved ones is how you approach it when you're talking to them. Because you see this as something that needs to be addressed and you just want to charge ahead and do a lot of times like we do in a lot of our life. But this is a very personal thing. You were talking about their independence and their lifestyle. And so how you approach that can really go a long way in what their reaction is going to be. You found that to be true?
Yes, I have. It crosses over every demographic, Morris. I think we have to earn the right to speak into people's lives. And with senior adults, it's no different. What's so hard sometimes with older adults, especially, in the world in which we live where families are spread out everywhere. You come home for Christmas, right? And that's your one time a year to come home and you see all these blaring things that are going on and you have exactly 6 days before you're getting back on a plane to leave. And so you want to address all of the issues that you pick up on. And that's just going to be the reality for some. My hope in conversations like this, Morris, is that it won't be the reality for everyone. If you care enough about someone to want to deal with their issues, whether it's their clutter, their new diagnoses, their cognitive impairments, fall risk, socialization, exploitation. If you love someone to want to care about those issues, you have to love them enough to do life with them. Because you do life with individuals, you can address issues real time as they arise. You don't do life with individuals and you're going to end up in court fighting. And that's just the reality. That is just the reality. And then you get someone like me on a professional side that then has to go in and build relationship and rapport in a day or two, which can be impossible and hard and difficult at best. But you still have to go in and build that relationship because adults, I hear people say all the time, twice a child, once an adult. That is so untrue. Adults are adults are adults, whether they have cognitive impairments or needs that need to be addressed or not. Adults are adults. You cannot handle them as children. And I think the one of the key ways to avoid that and avoid that trap is to have relationships, hopefully pre-need
Right.
relationships with people that you want to make sure that they're aging well.
Yeah. Well said. And that kind of bringing us again back full circle on what we were talking about. Um, a couple of things I want to kind of hit on quickly here at the end, and then we're not hitting on them quickly because they're not big issues, but one of the things that I know you and I have touched on, you invited me last year to come speak on seniors and driving issues, and I know that
Mm-hmm.
that's not only an issue for them, their personal safety, but it's an issue for others on the road and their safety.
It
But
is. It is, Mars.
but that's a big one. I mean, that's a big topic when you talk about speaking to mom and dad or speaking to a friend or a family member about, hey, I'm not sure if you need to be driving anymore. You start taking those keys away, it hits home, I imagine.
I had a son come here not too long ago, and he said, Miss Crutcher, I think it's time for me to talk to my father about his driving. And I said, okay, so let's have some dialogue, and we can definitely get a driving eval done. By the way, Mars, driving evals are covered by Medicare. So with the doctor's order, you can go and have a driving eval, and it'll be covered by Medicare. But I wanted to inquire more what was bringing him to this place. And he said, well, I'm not 100% certain. I said, well, how is he driving? What issues are you concerned with? Because age alone should not be a disqualifier to driving. And let me make that perfectly clear. There are some 40-year-olds that don't need car keys. And so age is not an automatic take the keys away or determine it to someone not being able to drive. So I like to ask probing questions because there's a lot of ageism going on where we automatically make assumptions about seniors. And so I said, so tell me, what makes you concerned about your father's driving? And he said, well, I can't tell you anything specific, Miss Crutcher, because I don't ride with him. Ding, 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 ding. That is a
Right.
problem. That is a problem. If someone's driving has gotten to the place where you're afraid to get in the car with them, then we are past the point that a conversation should be had.
Yeah.
And I will also say this, Mars, if it is your mother or your father, then you are probably not the one to have the conversation with them about driving. Let that be a dialogue had by the physician. One of the things that we oftentimes do is to call the physician ahead of time and say, Mr. So and so, Mrs. So and so has an appointment today. We've noticed some real issues with their driving. Would you be willing to have this conversation with them and then order a driving eval? The entity that does the driving eval, Karen Hislop here in town, is dynamic over at Therapy Achievements. But once the doctor writes that order for the driving eval, then the communication happens between the evaluator and the physician, and subsequently the physician and the senior who had the driving eval. So you get to maintain the place of being the golden child son, Mars, because you didn't take the keys away. You're just
Right.
responding to the recommendation of the physician.
I love that. That is
Yeah.
great feedback and a great way to look at it. And that's something that, it happens. It's a great point you make at the outset of that is that we get ready to go somewhere with mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, and it's like, hey, I'll just drive, and
Yes.
you just naturally
Yes.
get in the car and do. But it might be better to say, hey, why don't you drive and I'll ride, and then you don't have to make any comments, no backseat driving. It just gives you a purview into how they're doing, how are
Yes.
their reflexes, how is their vision,
Yes.
how is everything going, just to quietly evaluate. Then you can take the steps that you just kind of alluded
Yes.
to.
Yes. Or follow them, Morris. I have many clients that will follow. We know their routines. We'll have an adult child or a neighbor to notify us, when they're leaving, if they're leaving, and we follow them. There's a lot that you can tell and see from a safe distance. But if you don't feel safe, think about that young child who could be the victim of someone behind the wheel that shouldn't be. And I
Yeah.
think we have an accountability to our community to keep people on the road that should be driving. And many times, if you're proactive, it's not a matter of just totally relinquishing the keys. It may be you can no longer drive at night, or you can no longer drive on the interstate. There's oftentimes modifications that can be put into place that can keep, to go back to our earlier conversation, keep someone as independent as possible. Because for many, including my mother, driving is a quality of life thing. And so, what happens when we don't have conversations in the way and as soon as they should be had, then we minimize the opportunity to be able to say, let's do this with these safety precautions in place versus you can't drive anymore. And on the other side of an accident, especially if someone has been hurt, it's usually you can't drive anymore. Versus proactively having the conversation, we reduce the opportunity for accidents to occur by just putting personalized interventions in place.
Yeah. Well, great points. And the things that I'd add to that, one thing I might add that we've talked on at the aging seminar last year was making sure mom and dad's car's set up right, making sure the seats adjusted right, making sure the mirrors are adjusted right, the front mirrors, the side mirrors, the seats at the proper height, the steering wheel, everything like that's adjusted, because I know when I get in the car, if my wife's been in my car, I'm in her car, it's all out of whack. And it seems like if I don't have it set in the memory, it takes me days to get it right. And I may not see as well as I need to be seeing. And so it's important to make sure that everything's set up so they're in the best environment possible to be as safe as possible.
Yes, Mars, that and the fact that the four-door Cadillac may not be the best option of a car as you begin to age and have mobility issues. You may want to break it down to a two-door Honda, just something a little bit that has a little bit more drivability. And that's no plug for Honda and no shoot at Cadillac. I think both cars are good cars, but I think you have to put your loved one in a situation that sets them up to succeed. And that's whether we're talking about our 16 or 17-year-old teenager or our 70-year-old mom. What has always worked may not work. And that comes on the other side of relationship and dialogue and pre-planning. And I don't see those things causing harm to anyone, Morris. I see the lack of those things being put in place causing a whole lot of harm and costing individuals a whole lot of money. So if your listeners don't hear anything else, I say customize what quality of life is for you. And if you want to age well, the time to start talking about what that means specifically is right now. And then be proactive about putting those interventions. If you want to travel the world, if you want to have the body of a bodybuilder, it's never too late to set out and do that. If you want to decrease your number of falls, if you want to live in your house until your last day, all of those things can be accomplished if there's a plan. And if the creek rises, a plan will keep the bank from breaking and possibly save your life.
That's right. Again, just great advice, and that kind of dovetails in the last couple of things. Was you touched on this earlier, and that is finances, and something that I'm sure that one of the signs that you may see in planning for the future for elderly family members and loved ones, and one of the things that we've seen in our office is financial elder abuse, where people will take advantage of seniors in various ways by getting access to their money, or selling them some kind of side story or scheme to have them give money to them. What are some tips that you can say, other than in addition to sound financial estate planning, what are some things that you would suggest that people to look out for with their family members and loved ones in terms of their finances, to make sure that they're not being taken care of?
One, again, and I know it seems like I'm harping on this, but I think it's the first method of defense against exploitation, Morris, is preventing social isolation. When people are lonely, they are vulnerable. And so you'd be amazed at what, a phone call once a week, once a day, a visit regularly will do in lines of keeping someone protected against predators. Predators know those seniors that are socially isolated, that don't have good relationships or any relationships with their families, their friends, their neighbors. So looking out for social isolation. And then secondly, if an individual is having executive judgment issues in one area, then that makes them prone to be exploited in other areas. So if someone has always been very frugal and you notice there, and this is not exaggerating, we've had a client to actually do this, to go out to the car lot and buy 3 vehicles. Um, might need to dig a little bit deeper into that and not just chalk that up to a later life crisis.
Right, right. Well, I think the open lines of communication through everything we're talking about today are really important, and that's having you and others in your circle, in your loved one's circle, and your family member circle, to stay in contact with them. Don't to know what's going on, ask questions, and be involved. Without, as you said, don't treat them like a child, but be involved with them. Talk to them. Have that open dialogue, so you can get the information to assist them in the quality of life that they want to have.
Yes, for sure.
One of the last things I wanted to touch on that I know probably a lot of people watching this video and the interview will, may have questions about is, there are a lot of assisted living facilities. There are a lot of nursing homes out there now. Mm-hmm. A lot of time, we hear, horror stories or stories about things out there, but I'm sure there are a lot of great ones out there too. I mean, when someone is has planned ahead, when they're doing what you're suggesting, they can do this on the front end where they're not at a crisis point of, we've got to make that decision right now. What do you suggest when someone is looking for, after, assisted living or nursing home facility? What are some things that you would suggest people kind of just be on the lookout for, and items that they should check off to look for?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying that no two facilities are created equal. Just like when you purchase homes, you have to really know what you want in a facility, and be educated about the different types of care that's provided, from an assisted living to an independent living to a skilled nursing or nursing home facility. You need to educate yourself on what each of those facilities have to offer. As far as levels of care, Morris. And that education should probably not be done by the marketing staff at that particular facility alone. They are great sources of information, but that shouldn't be the exhaustive body of where you glean your information from. There should be some basics that you know about each level of care before you ever pick up the phone and schedule a tour for facility A. Go to sites like the TARCOG site. There are ad nauseum, our site, letstalkasap.com. We have an e-library where you can look up assisted livings, you can look up skilled nursing facilities and see what those facilities should be offering. And then definitely schedule a tour. Call the marketing people at these facilities and see if the neighborhood, if you will, works for you, if that environment works for you. But when it comes to what you can expect, the basic bare bones in the way of how am I going to be taken care of, what services are going to be provided, you should know what that level of care offers prior to visiting a facility. Geography also always plays a key role when I have clients that are looking for facilities. Know where you want to be. And it always is not wisdom for you to be necessarily in an environment that's most familiar, although that is something to be considered. You want to be where, Mars, if I want you to visit me every day, if my expectations, if quality of life for me is to see you and to see your son, on a daily basis, then I need to put myself in your line of traffic. So I want to be as close to where you work or as close to where you live as I possibly can, so that it's realistic that what I view as quality of life can happen. And if that's seeing family, if that's being close to family, sometimes it may mean relocating out of the neighborhood that I've been in for 20 years, because it's more important for me to see those people that I love than it is to shop at the grocery store that I've always shopped at when somebody's fixing my meals anyway. Does that make sense?
It does. And what I'm gathering and what's really ringing or resounding and just sticking out to me out of our conversation today is planning. And it is just having that open dialogue and conversation. What is important to your loved one? What's important to the family members that are going to be, actively involved on a daily or weekly or monthly basis with them? when you're making this kind of decision is doing your homework, but also, talking about what kind of, what are they looking for out of a facility? How
Yeah.
often are they looking for you to visit? What kind of activities and familiarity for them? I think, again, it all kind of goes back to that planning thing.
It does. It does.
Before we wrap up here, I think one thing that I think maybe to kind of dovetail into the planning is
Mm-hmm.
the stress of all this, the stress for the family, for the loved one that's going through it, that maybe having some of these life changes and golden year issues that we've been talking about for the last little while, but for their family members that are trying to help them go to manage all of this.
Yes.
What do you? Is planning just kind of the root way of trying to alleviate some of that stress? Is that one of the things you would say?
Usually the stress comes because of poor planning, Mars. But the one thing I will say about caregiver stress is that it is real, and it is nothing that the person experiencing it should feel guilty about. Um, Usually when you have caregivers and you ask how they're doing, because they love their loved ones, they don't want to complain. They don't want to give you a laundry list. And so a lot of the feelings and emotions and the stress that they're encountering, it's being internalized. And the one thing I've observed over the years is that oftentimes I find that the caregiver usually ends up in physical distress more so than the person that they're caring for. Because they're not taking care of self. And so I would just advise anyone that's out there caring for a loved one to solicit help early. Identify what help means to you early. Make a list of those things that if you run into people that say, hey, if you ever need me for anything, give me a call. You're not going to call. So make those lists of things early so that when people come and say, how can I help? You've already identified things that can lighten your load. And respite. Take those breaks, plan those breaks. Don't wait for the bottom to fall out. Don't find yourself in the hospital or crying throughout the day and you can't explain why. Don't wait for those times to come. Go ahead and plan that vacation 12 months in advance, 6 months in advance. Get caregivers in. There's a Medicare benefit that will cover your loved one going into a skilled nursing facility for respite so that you can get a break if you're taking care of them at home. There's just so many different resources out there. The area agencies on aging all throughout the United States. There are area agencies on aging. Look them up in your neighborhood. Let them be a resource to you. But caregivers, my heart just goes out to those that have taken on the task of caregiving, because the number one recognizable trait of a caregiver is that they care for everyone else but themselves. And so I just really challenge any caregivers that are watching, prioritize yourself. Because if you aren't around, who can you care for anyway? So thank you, Morris, for bringing up the topic of caregivers, because there's a lot that can be said about that. And we could have talked for 45 minutes just about resources that are out there available to caregivers and why most caregivers don't use them. But I just really challenge caregivers to put yourselves first sometime. Because it's kind of like the mask in the airplane. They always tell you when you reach up, apply the breathing apparatus to yourself first, because if you pass out, who's there?
Wow, that's great advice. And anytime we're going through these things, there is so much stress on us that we feel like everything kind of comes crashing down on us. But you're right, that we have to, the caregiver has to take care of his or herself first, or in conjunction with taking care of their loved one, because if they don't, they're not going to be physically or mentally able to continue to keep up the care for their loved one if they're not taking care of themselves.
Yeah.
Well, Chanda, I know I would like to share after the show. Well, again, I apologize for the technical difficulties. We'll make sure the show gets shared out right in the comments below. We'll share your website that has a lot of valuable resources and that has links to other secondary resources that people can find out information about all the things that we've been talking about today. And that, your contact information is in there too, if anybody wants to reach out to you about caregiver questions or information that we've discussed today they may want to get some more information on, then we're certainly going to make that available to all our guests. And we'd ask everybody to please like and share the interview today so we can spread this word so more caregivers and family members can know about these issues, and the takeaway of trying to plan ahead and be proactive and not reactive.
Yeah.
But Chanda, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for all you doing for our community and for our loved ones and putting this message out there today.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chanda.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.